Allora, iniziamo, buon pomeriggio a tutti. Cominciamo con Giuseppe Gatti, col quale ho già parlato parecchio, sostituto procuratore nazionale antimafia e antiterrorismo, che ha scritto e ha indagato.
Let's welcome Mr. Giuseppe Gatti, Deputy Prosecutor at a national level against mafia and against terrorism. He's been dealing with the Albanian mafia in the most recent years, a phenomenon that is constantly expanding. So I'd like to listen to Giuseppe Gatti's speech because I wonder what are the links between the Albanian mafia and the other ones. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I want to say hello to all our guests, and thank you for having me. I would like to tell you something about an analysis of this Albanian mafia, and then secondly, I would like to share with you some proposals about contrasting methods. The Albanian criminal groups are the most widespread foreign criminal groups in the European Union. Between 2018 and 2020, the number of Albanians arrested in Europe for cocaine trafficking has exceeded those of Brazilians and Colombians. However, we lack a deep analysis of these criminal groups. This phenomenon is generally underestimated. What is happening is very similar to the phenomenon that happened in the past, when the Italian mafias abroad were underestimated. Such underestimation allowed the Italian mafias, and let's think of the 'Ndrangheta, the Calabrian mafia, to outsource and become rooted in other countries outside Europe. Well, the Albanian organized crime has some similarities with 'Ndrangheta. Let's think of the importance of familism, the existence of rigid behavioral codes, the criminal fame, the criminal reputation that is rooted in their territory. But they can also have very important economic revenues. They hold relationships with other criminal groups, and they take advantage of the most sophisticated technologies. Familism is surely one of the main characteristics of Albanian criminal groups. It is a very strong bond, and it is something that comes from far away, from long time tradition, based on the besa, which means pride, which means honor, trust. So all the occasions of family relationships are regulating the bonds among criminal individuals. This bond expands to the entire family of everyone, and these family bonds coexist with each other and develop thanks to the fact that people have grown in the same district or have attended the same school. However, the same fact of being Albanian means a lot. it means being associated. That is why criminal Albanian groups do not have affiliation rituals. There is no christening, so to speak, because a family bond is more than enough to imply a very strong bond. So, Albanian groups have been established themselves abroad. However, they still maintain tight links with the original structures, the original groups in Albania. In Albania are the headquarters of drug trafficking, and it's in Albania that they carry out money laundering and that they carry out investments in businesses. So these groups combine the characteristics of a military mafia plus a business mafia. So these criminal structures were growing more in the 90s after the dictatorship fell down. These people took advantage of the confusion, of the chaos, of the moment where there was no official government. So these criminals acquired war weapons. They conquer neighborhoods in towns. They create some fortresses that were inaccessible for other people. They engage in conflicts with other groups, with other gangs, and their goal is to take control of every illicit activity. The main point is that they are everything starts from family feuds. And being part of a family means being part of an army, of a criminal group. And this has led to a constant phenomenon of killings, and basically it was a bloodbath. So armed conflicts characterize the relationship of these groups with the institutions. There are murders against, I mean to say, politicians are murdered, police officers are murdered. These criminal groups are famous for their ferocity, and they are able to condition the environment where they live in. But now they don't even need to engage in violent attacks, in armed conflicts, because they are well established and they become a sort of another state, a parallel state. However, they also have all the characteristics of the mafias. They hold the military control of the territory they operate in. They can provide services, protection, and guarantees to the population. They are well accepted by the citizens. They have tight links with businessmen. They impose monopoly regimes in strategic business sectors. They have a strong influence on electoral businesses, electoral issues. Due to the war in Yugoslavia, the Albanian organizations specialize in the traffic of goods. Later on, they specialize in people smuggling and the exploitment of prostitution. In Italy, the Albanian mafias are everywhere. They make choices, and they are guided in a very strong pragmatism. In southern Italy, the Albanian groups hold a dialogue and relationships with the well-rooted local mafias. In the north of Italy, where the situation is more fluid, the Albanians try to conquer portions of territory in a very violent way. The sector that mainly boosted the evolution of the Albanian mafia is, of course, international drug trafficking. At the beginning, the Albanian cartels specialized in importing marijuana produced in Italy. They imported it to Italy, and they established stable links with the mafia in Apulia. First, the Albanians took charge of the production and packing of this marijuana. The transport and arrival were managed together with the Apulian mafia. But in the course of some years, things have changed a lot. Transport, sale, and distribution of marijuana in Italy is under the Albanian mafia groups, who are well established in Apulia. So across the Adriatic Sea is a route of dealing with heroin. And the Albanian groups have also strong links with the Turkish mafia. But the point is that with cocaine, they climbed the criminal ladder, basically. Thanks to its extraordinary organizational abilities and efficiency in operational methods, they can count on a huge network all over the world. They have a dialogue with the cartels in Colombia and Brazil. They have representatives in the tribal borders. They have important headquarters in Dubai, which is the place where the most important negotiations over drugs happen. And so the Albanian mafia is very powerful, and the Albanian criminal groups hold a strong presence in the ports of Hanover, Antwerp, and Rotterdam. That are the places where the biggest amounts of cocaine from South America reach Europe. And the Albanian mafia is always evolving, and it hasn't got a horizontal hierarchy anymore. Its relationships are based on a horizontal way of thinking. In the past, the Albanian groups didn't have direct connections with the South Americans. It was the Calabrian mafia to hold those contacts. But now the Albanians have a direct management with the South American cartels, and they manage huge deliveries of cocaine. The enormous profits of drug trafficking allow the Albanian groups to have huge amounts of money. This money is invested mainly in Albania in several business sectors. It is mostly used to corrupt politicians and public employees. The organizational structure of the Albanian mafia has changed. from a static model, a vertical-based model, we can now see that the mafia has evolved towards a more fluid, a more flexible model, a network that covers the whole supply chain in criminal sectors. They have huge capitals, as we said. They have strong supports within the institutions. They rely on corruption. They take advantage of the most advanced computerized technology, and they are in constant search of new markets. Violence has changed too. It's more modern now. It is not very visible. Just very specific actions are performed. There are no spectacular attacks anymore. There are professional killers who do their jobs and make no mistakes. So there are funders, there are guarantors, and there are mediators in this new conception of the Albanian mafia. The mediator takes care of all the passages, all the people in the supply chain. The guarantor gives his guarantees to people involved in businesses, and the guarantor also is in charge of getting the necessary protection and supports. And it is also responsible for infiltrating in the political world. This is how the Albanian criminal groups are getting more and more operational at an international level, and they have relationship and cooperations with other international big cartels, with the macro mafias. So the Albanians are the Albanians rely on large networks of criminals. They take advantage of cryptocurrencies. They take advantage of any technological advance. So now, in order to contrast this mafia, we have to rely on the precious legacy that Giovanni Falcone gave us. We cannot rely on seizing some cargoes from time to time, nor investigating single people. We have to work having in mind that this mafia is a system. We have to work on detecting the links. We have to work in a comprehensive way in order to tackle the problems of drug trafficking and money laundering. That is why the national directions, the anti-mafia national directives, have set up a true analysis lab on Albanian mafias. The goal is to carry out an updated mapping of such groups and to identify the links of these structures in Albania and those operating in Italy, in Europe, and in South America. This activity is a very complex one. We are trying to compose a very big and complicated mosaic. That is why we are taking advantage of everything that is at our disposal. Information coming from financial flows, from prisons, from security experts in all the embassies we have contacts with. We resort to testimonies. We can do, we try to do anything that we want. And our activity is proving successful because now we are starting to see the first results. So the links emerge between the Albanian structures in Albania and the links that they have in other countries. So we are working on long-term strategies in order to hit the Albanian mafia from every front, because we are lagging behind, and now we have to work to recover, and we have to work together, because if we work on our own, there's nothing we can accomplish. Giovanni Falcone used to say that these very structured mafias can be contrasted only through a specialized, high-profile network, because investigation modes have to evolve constantly, and this is the only way to fight the Albanian criminal groups. Today, we have huge amounts of decrypted communication nodes. And most of these decrypted information belong to criminal groups from Albania. Our goal is to make use of these encrypted materials in the most effective and rapid way. Joint teams are very important in this sense, because they can work together, and they prove that they prove efficient, because we are beginning to see the first good results. Albanian drug traffickers were arrested in some cases, and some of them decided to confess. Thanks to their confessions, our investigation methods improved, so we gained good results in tracking down money laundering activities. But this is just the beginning. In order to go on, we need the contribution of you all. Everybody needs to share information and knowledge, and we have to do that in the fastest possible way. So we need to talk to each other, to listen to each other, to be constantly in touch, because we all need to get trust in each other. So this is the big legacy that Giovanni Falcone has given to us. And in order to commemorate his legacy, we have to apply his teachings. We have to work together, because we must be aware that we're all part of the same big team.
Thank you, Mr. Gatti. And now, Argentina with Matias Alvarez from the Procunar, who will share his point of view on international cooperation with a special focus on port infrastructures. He's also worked a lot with repentance, so I would like to know how many repentants are there in Argentina, and if they are in prisons, and where exactly. First of all, I will start with the presentation, and then I will reply to your question. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and thank you for giving me the chance to talk about drug trafficking. I have a few slides to focus firstly on the criminal activity we are analyzing, and Secondly, to focus on the main challenges for prosecutors. And thirdly, on strategies and possible solutions to tackle this problem. First of all, we shall consider that we are living in a peak of production of cocaine. We have around 2,000 tons per year of cocaine. So if we focus on these statistics of the United Nations and other agencies, this quantity is estimated to increase. So this is a very important challenge, which allows us to understand how the market works. Of course, this represents an advantage for drug traffickers in the European market for consumption and prices. Prices in the European market concerning the distribution of cocaine. And of course, for organizations working and acting in South America, as there's not a lot of competition as it is the case in the Asian market, for example. So there's the need to move a huge quantity of drug from one place to another, from South America to Europe, and it is easier to do so because there's only their drug in South America. So now we are witnessing to new commercial routes for the distribution of cocaine through different methods. Yesterday we mentioned the routes of Northern Europe, countries which are not used to receive such important amounts of cocaine. For example, there was loads coming from Bolivia and directed to Europe. And then we have other routes crossing Africa, for example. We also have the European route through Uruguay and Paraguay, allowing to transport cocaine from South America to Europe. We have several routes, as I said, from Uruguay, Paraguay towards Europe, without having to crossing, for example, Peru or Argentina or Chile. How do criminal organizations transport these huge quantities of drug? According to the report of the World Customs Organization, the majority of drugs is transported through maritime transport. Of course, this is the most immediate way, for example, through cargo ships. It is important to remember that in port controls, only 2% of containers are controlled. This is why the maritime way seems to be the most appropriate for the transportation of cocaine loads. Let's see how drug is transported. Anti-drug prosecutors perfectly know this process, but I have to show it anyway. We have the classical method. Drug is hidden in containers through, for example, affiliated companies. So drug is hidden. Also inside a paint box or among fruits and vegetables. But this is a risky method nowadays for traffickers. Then there's the rip-on, rip-off, the contamination of legal goods. So methods in which cocaine is hidden in cargoes of legal and normal companies. So what happens once at the port, containers are opened to be filled with cocaine, so illegal products among legal products, and then the drop-off. We have ships close by to each other, and the load is moved from one ship to another one, thanks to the cooperation of the crew of both ships. Of course, it is possible to use several methods together, combined with each other, from the port of departure to the port of arrival. And I also forgot to mention an important research of European prosecutors. We must talk about contamination, but also about the theft of containers. So containers are often stolen outside of ports because, ports are extremely controlled nowadays. And then we have other solutions. For example, the one used in Galicia with fishing vessels. So fishing vessels approach other smaller ships to take drugs, and then sailing vessels used to cross the Atlantic Ocean and transport cocaine. And now we have also drug submarines. We saw off the coast of Galicia this submarine transporting drug. And the submarine has crossed the entire ocean to transport drugs. And we saw something like that off the coast of Galicia and Portugal. And now then there's also new methods, a contamination of the of ships below the waterline. So you have divers taking the drug on the bottom of the sea. So drug is transported below the waterline. But we have to focus on these problems and characteristics in order to overcome the global challenges we are facing. We have challenges concerning organized crimes, and the first factor to keep in mind is the transnational character. This is a huge problem. I'm a prosecutor. There's loads arriving into the port, so I have to understand if the shipping company is a legal company or not. And I have to be supported by the country of origin of the company. And then there's the associated corruption. The presence of corrupted actors in the private and public sector is clear. These actors allow drug traffickers to transport drug. For example, we have custom officers or other people in charge of surveillance in ports. For example, with the clan Losa, we had checked a ship of the European police, which in theory was approaching a merchant vessel, but it was actually transporting drug. So it was the police ship transporting drug. And then we have the exchange of substances. We are observing several phenomena nowadays influencing the market, and this third factor does not allow us to implement the follow the money strategy, because nowadays cocaine is not paid by cash or through liquidity, but cocaine is transformed into synthetic drugs and then transported to the American continent to be distributed. And then we have the existence of huge criminal networks. We have interconnected and interdependent actors. over the entire chain. And these actors are extremely well specialized in several fields. This is why it is very difficult for us to investigate. We have profession experts of money laundering, brokers, transport and logistics services only for the transport of illegal substances and drugs. Given these challenges, we have several strategies we can implement. For example, the following ones implemented by ministries. First of all, we have the interagency cooperation in order to understand how to tackle this criminal phenomenon and to stop it. The ability of public prosecutors is limited to investigation, so we have to cooperate with other agencies to broaden our horizons. We have to tackle the financial assets of criminal associations. This is obvious, of course, but this is a central aspect. We should not limit ourselves to the requisition of assets. It is important to identify all the actors and understand the chain of responsibility, and this can be done only assessing other previous criminal cases. So we need special investigation techniques. And the role of informants, of prosecution witnesses is pivotal. We are understanding the importance of prosecution witnesses nowadays, as they play a pivotal role to solve cases of organized crime. I cannot share the exact number of prosecution witnesses we have, but we have several of them. We work with them to solve cases. And as the president of the AIAMP was saying, we are trying to increase our work with informants and prosecution witnesses. And then the coordination of investigations. And yes, I'm speaking of coordination instead of cooperation, because it is important to coordinate the work and investigations of several actors with a common goal. We always work with three elements, all necessary to reach our goals. These are essential tools we have and we use. We have the exchange of information, then we have controlled deliveries and joint investigation teams. We know many of these tools used by police forces, but also by prosecutors. As I mentioned before, to use these tools in real time, it is important to know who to rely on, which country. For example, if there's a container traveling from one country to another, I must know who to get in touch with. And this is why the role of prosecutors is extremely important, and the role of the AIAMP to reunite all public prosecutors specialized in the field and investigating in such cases. And then we can also rely on the presence of Italian and Dutch prosecutors. Together with my colleague, I'm the coordinator of this network, and our goal is to ensure an efficient and agile cooperation among different prosecutors' offices. This is why the network is at your complete availability. You can send an email, get in touch with the network in case you need urgent support. And I would like to thank you all for your availability. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Adesso torniamo.
Now back to Europe with Barbara Sergenti. National Anti-Mafia and Anti-Terrorism Deputy Prosecutor, to talk about the judicial cooperation with the Latin American countries and the El Pacto program. And then I'd like her to talk about alternative measures and to share her point of view with us. Thank you. 10 minutes for your speech. The floor is yours. It is an easy task because it's pretty easy to summarize the basic notions, contributions, and reflections already shared with us during these 3 days.
Because during these 3 days, all the people who have held speeches and also during small groups, the work of small groups, everybody has stressed in their own language, has stressed the same keywords. John Lucas will be mentioned first because he gave us the European perspective. He said many times that we have to work together. Giuseppe Gatti has already said that we have to make a joint effort. All the public Italian prosecutors who have direct contacts with the foreign colleagues have said the same words, while the Latin American colleagues have already said, let's work together. Starting from the presentation of Mr. Casal, the national prosecutor, who made reference to the main instruments which are the common investigation teams. Matthias has just talked about, he used a phrasing, he used a specific terminology such as coordinating investigations. Common investigation teams are not something new. It's something that we're already using in Europe since a long time, because I remind you something you already know, which is the fact that the European tool that we have took advantage of started in 2002. And in Italy, we started in 2016, and we have formed so many joint investigation teams. But as criminal groups are constantly evolving, we are as well. So our methods are changing a little bit. And this happens in Europe and in Latin America. Article 19 of the Palermo Convention is our main reference in our work, as this article number 19 deals with common investigation teams. These teams are also mentioned in Article 9. Our friends and colleagues from Latin American countries have some specific protocols within the framework of Mercosur. So we have the legal framework. Our need now is to increase and reinforce these common investigation teams. I have to say that this is being done in Italy because a cooperation, a coordination is taking place with Ecuador. We have many common teams. We have some with Argentina. We share some teams with Brazil. The special feature which I want to stress is the evolution of the concept of common investigation team. Each country participating in this, because, a team can be formed by members from many states, not just two. But this team must guarantee, thanks to the responsibilities of each country's public prosecutors, each team must guarantee an internal coordination method, because let's remember that the criminal phenomena that we are witnessing are comprehensive, they are complex. So now we should focus on creating logistics and technology networks, direct contacts at a national and, above all, at an international level. All these features are shared by criminal groups too. So our investigation strategy must link, for example, Italy and Argentina, but it must not be rigid. We are witnessing that all the little portions of a criminal network are being identified thanks to common investigation teams. These teams also allow mutual support in finding the right informants. For example, as Giuseppe has said, there's a need for sharing hearings where informators are being listened to, are being questioned, and the positive factor is that each informant can share their specific knowledge, and such knowledge can be shared among people from the police forces of different countries.
Direzione distrettuale italiana, le plurime direzioni distrettuali italiane che stanno indagando sul fenomeno avranno un loro punto di vista e potranno.
The point is that an informant can be useful to different countries' police forces because each prosecutor's office might have different information about such informants' work. So the informant's testimony can be useful to everybody. I would like to mention the organization that was created in the prisons of Venezuela. It's called Tenderagua because in northern Chile, it's growing a lot. It's becoming more operational. It's proving, it's demonstrating having all the special characteristics of criminal groups, a high degree of violence, contacts within prisons, and recruiting abilities inside and outside the prisons, as well as corruption and involvement in drug trafficking. I would like to conclude by saying that within common investigation teams, we can put in place the best strategies at our disposal. In previous days, we've been speaking about these techniques in small groups. Undercover agents may be coordinated by common investigation teams, which can take charge in a more comprehensive way of such undercover agents. So their work is not fragmented. I make reference to some portion. For example, let's take the Latin American and the European portions. If we find the connection between the two sides, between the two portions, we need common investigation teams with members belonging to Europe and to Latin America, because this is helpful in identifying the criminals.
Ci rivede il nostro ultimo intervento argentino.
So now, Juan Batista Maicas, he's supposed to be here, but he's not here. No, here he is. So, public prosecutor in Buenos Aires. I think he belongs to a dynasty of judges and lawyers. Is that right? Yes.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the Assistance Support Program for Transnational Cooperation, the Anti-Mafia and Anti-Terrorism Directorate, the Higher School for Magistracy, the Falcone Borsellino Programme, the International Italian and American Organization. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this interesting conference with such important colleagues. And now I would keep my intervention in my mother tongue, Spanish. I'll try to be short for two reasons. First of all, because it's late. I don't want to annoy you. And also because they've kindly asked us to stick to the time we have. And we've already repeated the same things we share. So we can summarize everything. We cooperate together to fight this phenomenon. But now I will give a few more details, of course. Thank you again for this opportunity, as it is extremely important to create such dialogue with international actors. And I'd like to stress the importance of our commitment to fight against such complex systems and organized crimes, and the other related topics are our main focus of activity. This kind of crime is at the basis of corruptions and other problems against society and authorities, and the criminal phenomenon is developing, becoming more and more structured, branched out. Criminal organizations are crossing borders and operate with increasingly well-structured methods. And also the work of local authorities developed to fight this phenomenon. And transnationality in the Latin American region has evolved over time. It was repeated several times over the last few days. We mentioned the tribal border. In Latin America, this is something that characterizes our interventions and actions. We try to implement policies to help us eradicating drug trafficking, and drug trafficking nowadays is an important threat for the European continent. In our territory, we have important ports favorizing the drug trafficking from Europe to Latin America and vice versa, and we have these tribal borders. And in such contexts, local efforts are needed, but are not sufficient. The transnational characteristics of this phenomenon request an international cooperation, and international cooperation is the only possible solution to fight in an efficient way against this problem and threat. And we've understood this from the examples shared by my colleagues. We know this is not an easy topic. A huge coordination is needed. Strategies are needed to protect the interests, values, and judicial cultures of all countries, and this heterogeneity is often an obstacle to progress of investigations, causing frustration of authorities, and criminals take often advantage of this lack of organization. Over the last decades, several efforts have been implemented. We try to put into practice a transnational agenda to reinforce our cooperation among countries. We've implemented several conventions, such as the UN conventions, which became an extremely solid and useful tool at the judicial level, allowing for judicial cooperation. This convention implies several countries and focuses on corruption, the participation of companies in criminal actions, and for the authorization or requisition and seizing, we've often turned to this convention, promoting also the cooperation among states. The participation of the Ibero-American countries represented an important effort in the fight against drug trafficking. Of course, we've implemented several activities for the fight against corruption through the implementation of European programs combining the activities of Europe and Latin America. We have, for example, El Pacto, which reunites 18 Latin American countries, among which Argentina. It is a very important program because it promotes the relationships between citizens and the rule of law. We have other initiatives supported by El Pacto, and we created a Latin American committee with the goal of join our forces and support Latin American countries in the fight against organized crime. Then we've also elaborated an assessment of threats in the region through a specific document, always concerning the Latin American region. All these measures show our commitment, the international commitment, the commitment for the use of international tools to fight against organized crime. Of course, we should not underestimate our efforts, and it is important to acknowledge that we have to face important challenges. One of this is the definition of some activities. Criminal networks have expanded over time and created infiltration in local authorities, economies, as mentioned by our colleague from Sao Paulo. This diversification of criminal activities follows the transnationality of the phenomena, making it very difficult to define this phenomenon. This is why we shall promote specific legislative measures and to harmonize the existing laws. But for this, we need the commitment of all countries. The differences among legal frameworks make it difficult to extradite criminals, or also the exchange of information. And also the problem of the impossibility to punish criminals as they flee from one country to another one. It is important to comply with recommendations, especially in the field of requisition. Australia, United States, the member states of the European Union and Argentina have approved laws concerning the dismantle of criminal networks. We know that criminal groups need financial resources to implement their activities. Of course, national prosecutors' offices shall take into account the different perspectives at the local level. Some countries have developed their resources and tools, and other countries show a lack of resources to face such a serious crime, and this weakness of local systems has consequences at an international level, showing the need for international cooperation. It is pivotal to strengthen the cooperation for cross-border investigations at an international level to allow for an effective international cooperation. This is possible through the training of the agents involved, through the exchange of experiences. We also discussed the creation of international specialized teams composed of investigators, prosecutors, and other experts and professionals to fight against crime. Another way to strengthen the capacity of systems in this fight is to put into practice better systems. For example, the protection of sensitive data. Recently, the International Association of Prosecutors, which is a network, and it is composed of over 250,000 prosecutors, is thinking about the creation of a platform to improve the communication among prosecutors, because prosecutors, in order to allow prosecutors all over the world to access data in real time. So their role is fundamental. Techniques and models of investigations we have are increasing, and we need a specific framework to regulate the use of these tools at an international level. Otherwise, it will be impossible to achieve our common goals, and we know that the majority of our resources cannot be used if they not comply with regulations. Another important topic is corruption. Organized crime is strictly related to corruption for officers in general, but also magistrates who are part of the magistracy. It is important to underline the interconnection of these figures and roles with organized crime. It is important to tackle this problem to discourage illegal activities and crime. And we managed to obtain important results in Latin America in this field. In Argentina, in Santa Fe, over the last few years, we assisted to an exacerbation of a few phenomena showing a strict connection between authorities and criminals. Several attacks took place. Different prosecutors were victims of organized crime, for example, in Ecuador. And prosecutors received several threats. Over the last few years in Brazil, more than 5 judges were threatened and others were killed. So I think it would be also important to focus on the safety of magistrates and judges, but maybe in a separate conference. All these facts legitimate the use of judicial power, and we have to play all our cards. The consequences of the proliferation of crimes is particularly evident in specific fields, undermining the confidence in institutions and authorities. In Argentina, we have an index of corruption perception equal to 37 out of 100. So it is evident that the judicial power is under attack. We have an investigation showing that the role of independent magistracy is pivotal. Regional cooperation shall be guided towards a reinforcement of authorities and institutions, and the international cooperation between Europe and Latin America is a fundamental pillar in this fight against transnational organized crime, and I highlighted the importance of strengthening cooperation and relations in order to ease the exchange of information, especially in the judicial field. I keep insisting on the need to reinforce judicial systems to tackle this criminal phenomenon. And we can fight against this criminal phenomenon only through cooperation in order to progress in our regions and all over the world. 30 years ago, very far away from here, I was sitting behind my father's desk. And I was looking at a well-dressed man with mustache, and I was wondering who was that man, and that man was Giovanni Falcone. But today we are here to honor not only Giovanni Falcone, but also all other people who lost their lives. Thank you.
Now it is the time to sum up.
Cambiamo scenario.
Let's change our setup.
Gentili ospiti,
Buenas
se
tardes,
prendete
los invitamos
posto,
a tomar
è meglio.
asiento, por favor, para volver a empezar enseguida los trabajos. Ya tenemos alguna despedida de los huéspedes che salen para sus países, alcuni ospiti stranieri
È facile da dire.
stanno già facendo ritorno ai loro paesi.
Ma vai a farti spingere. Bene, tutti seduti, tutti attenti.
So please take your seats. Here we are about to start the second part of our afternoon works. It's about the Italian magistrates, representatives of the main prosecutors' officers in Italy, who will tell us what they think about the ideas that have emerged during this conference. I would also like to ask one question to all of them. Also, the minister, Mr. Mantovano, is present here, is the Undersecretary of State to the presidents of the Council. So, first of all, I would like to tell you about my opinion. Two factors have emerged, and they are very enriching to me. First of all, the growing role, the dominating role of the Calabrian Mafia that is really strong in its drug trafficking activities as it emerged from testimonies. And I would like to ask to magistrates who are here, how is that possible? How how come the Calabrian model became a winning one on the international markets? And then, secondly, the mafia is doing very well in the economic sectors. 2 or 3 years ago, we became aware that the mafias were changing their own nature and their methods because they do not use violent methods anymore, but they decided to become true capitalists and to enter the legal economy. Many of considerations like these have emerged during our talks. First of all, I would like to start with Giovanni Bombardieri, who is the prosecutor in Reggio Calabria. He spent 8 years in that role, and he knows the Calabrian mafia very well. Me le puoi fare?
Allora, da lui sì, aspetto una risposta.
So I expect him to tell us something about the 'ndrangheta and to the economic evolution of the mafia. So, Mr. Bombardieri, thank you. I'm still the prosecutor in Reggio Calabria. Why is the 'ndrangheta important? It has emerged very clearly from all the speeches, ranging from Mr. Grassi to other foreign colleagues, the importance of the 'ndrangheta, of the Calabrian mafia. It's everywhere in all the Italian and international investigations because it's been tracked down, it's been identified as a reliable ally in drug trafficking. Mr. Grassi said that the 'ndrangheta is a reliable partner for South American cartels since the 1980s. Why is that? In Cosa Nostra, we saw the first arrested people confess and repent. But this phenomenon is not present within the 'ndrangheta. And we saw this characteristic is in common with the PCC and the Albanian mafia. The Calabrian mafia is underestimated as far as its violence and its dangerous attitude is concerned. We saw how the 'ndrangheta was exported very far away from Italy to the US, to Australia, and it is underestimated down there as well. So the Calabrian mafia was able to win the trust of Latin American cartels. This allowed the Calabrian mafiosos to become the reference points in Europe. Of course, it has emerged the chance for the 'ndrangheta to buy drugs without paying any money immediately.
Iniziano nel panorama internazionale europeo ad emergere altre.
But there are also other criminal organizations which are as dangerous, as violent within the international drug market. Of course, my reference goes to the Albanian mafia. The Albanian criminal groups replicate some values that are present in the 'ndrangheta, familism, and so on. When we carried out investigations in 2015, we already became aware that the Albanian mafia had established tight link in Northern Europe with the 'ndrangheta. So the Calabrian Mafia was like the guarantor for Albanian groups towards Latin American cartels. And the Albanians had an important role in controlling the main ports of Northern Europe, such as Rotterdam and Antwerp. The Latin American cartels really trusted the 'ndrangheta, and this bond is still alive. The Albanians became more and more important and became more and more autonomous in the scenario of international drug trafficking. However, the 'ndrangheta is still very, very important and strong because it has the ability to control over southern Italy. So the 'ndrangheta has a prestigious role both in Italy and in Latin America because it is a very trusted partner. And there are also Calabrian criminals who went and lived in Colombia and worked as carried out their criminal activities down there. And some people even became international brokers in Colombia and were the representatives of the Italian mafia in Colombia and who were managing the whole drug trafficking. The 'ndrangheta proposed as the single partner as a reference point for cocaine smuggling in Europe, but the Latin American cartel didn't agree with this proposal. They didn't want the 'ndrangheta to be the sole partner for distributing cocaine in the whole European continent. Anyway, for example, as our Brazilian colleague told us, the arrest of important people in the 'ndrangheta, such as Sisi and Morabito, are a demonstration that the cooperation of prosecutors' offices and police forces is essential. Of course, the 'ndrangheta proposes itself as an international player, and today's speeches confirm this. Another element that has emerged is the need for cooperation. Investigation emergencies that emerge in Latin America. Let's think of the arrest of Pasquino, of other fugitives all over Latin America. During those the arrest of those people, a lot of informative material has been recovered. So in order to implement a better contrast to international organizations, there's a need to share that amount of information, that amount of material, which should be analyzed and shared. So maybe we need to work more on this aspect in order to improve in such a way. Another element that has emerged today is the need to implement joint investigation teams. This is a way of cooperating since the very beginning of an investigation, because in the past the cooperation was limited to the last phase of an investigation, to the operational phase. Today, instead, investigation teams are formed since the beginning. And they are a crucial factor for the development of an investigation and to obtain good results. Anyway, we have to say that in other countries, joint investigation teams are supposed to get authorization, are subject to bureaucratic requirements, and so this slows down the procedures. Maybe we should act in order to speed up all these procedures so that we can cooperate immediately and establish contacts among countries.
And now I'll give the floor to Nicola Gratteri. You've been prosecutor for a long time in Reggio Calabria, so you know the 'Ndrangheta case very well. Then I have a question concerning the 'Ndrangheta. I'd like to understand one thing. As a common perception, the 'Ndrangheta is considered as an archaic organization with its members barely knowing the Italian language. But then we can see it is actually in charge of an international network. So what are the characteristics of the 'Ndrangheta making the 'Ndrangheta clans reliable at the eyes of other criminal organizations in the world? Yes, in 1969, the 'Ndrangheta improves its status during an important meeting taking place in Montalto, near a sanctuary. And they established a new rule, the double affiliation of a Mafia leader. It means a Mafia leader can be member of a Mafia clan and also of a Masonry clan. So the rules changed at that time. And also the saints of reference for the 'Ndrangheta were Saint Michael Archangel and others. And we have new saints coming in and new figures such as Mazzini, Garibaldi, Cavour, who were representatives of the Masonry. Among Masonry members, we had representatives of the institutions, magistrates as well. In Locri, we have an important trial where this new organization of the Ndrangheta is acknowledged, and the following year we have a ruling, and for 4 years, magistrates, police forces, journalists, university professors kept speaking about another kind of Ndrangheta, a poor Ndrangheta. In Italy, there were 380 kidnappings, and the majority of them were perpetrated by the 'Ndrangheta. Every kidnapped allowed the 'Ndrangheta to earn around 1 billion of Italian lira. And there were houses, rooms, and oil cans full of banknotes hidden by the 'Ndrangheta. So there were two main consequences. At the beginning of the 90s, the Cosa Nostra mafia decided to act through campaigns of terrorism. For example, we remember Salvatore Riina, was considered as a real leader by Cosa Nostra. When we captured Riina, when we arrested him, he said if courage was blood, the sea would be red. So with the money, this money corresponds to Cosa Nostra war and terrorism. At the beginning of the 90s, we have a high demand for cocaine, because we are assisting to an homologation of habits in the Western culture. Back at that time, clothes, also the kind of drugs we used, was a sign of distinction of our political position and of our identity. In the 90s, what happens in Colombia, for example, it was possible to buy cocaine at a lower price, and still today we have organizations selling cocaine to the 'Ndrangheta at 1,000 euros per kilo. In '89, I started this kind of investigation. Back at the time, I was already in Colombia and Venezuela, and in Italy, magistrates did not approve my investigation as I was only focusing on drug. And also in Reggio Calabria, anti-mafia prosecutors used to say that they were not interested in drugs, so my work was not interesting for them. But in 7 years, requisitions, arrests, and investigations for drugs decreased a lot according to statistics. So this means that today the supermarkets in the Milan region are controlled by the 'Ndrangheta. Clubs are managed by the 'Ndrangheta, clubs located in Milan city center. And I remember that in the 90s, and I appreciate the efforts implemented by the Dutch. In the 90s, I was in touch with the prosecutor of Rotterdam, And we said, please be careful, here you have the 'ndrangheta. Back at the time, they were not listening to us, and today they have 3 mafias in the Netherlands, not only one. Now we have the Albanian mafia, the 3rd generation of North African mafia, and the 'ndrangheta. Not to mention the German. So what to do? I agree with everything that was mentioned today concerning joint investigation teams, for example, but we in Europe, what should we do? For example, the IILA could invest more in investigations in South America. Why the American Anti-Drug Administration is the strongest drug police in the world? The DEA invest money in this field. I had the opportunity to work in Colombia with the DEA and also with Colombian police supported by the DEA, which, as I said, invested in Colombia. The DEA purchased real estates to implement their offices, to carry out their investigations. Because the Americans have a different approach compared to us. We are investigators, they are buyers, which is different. We have different approaches and strategies, 2 different points of view. But they get the results they want. Together with Mr. Grassi, we were in Washington at a meeting with other representatives from all over the world, and Italy was considered as an example to follow. But today, we are not that technologically advanced. France is more technologically advanced than Italy, for example, because over the last few years, several things happened. In 2010, in Italy, we stopped the hiring of experts because we didn't have the resources to pay for our human resources. So we couldn't hire IT engineers or hackers to support us in our investigations. Every 4 to 5 years, we have to cooperate with France and the Netherlands for encrypted communications. But over the last few years, we've lost our know-how in this field. We have to find a solution. So the DA project existing in Colombia is a project we could actually copy, but we need 200,000 euro per year to implement such a kind of project. But I've been repeating the same thing over the last 30 years. Today, cocaine, to buy cocaine, we don't have to go to Santa Marta, Cartagena, and Bogota in Colombia. No. Today, investigations shows that the Camorra, from an IT point of view, is the most evolved mafia we have in Italy. I've assisted to interrogations of criminals these criminals explain to us a lot of things. For example, with this smartphone, I can order 2,000 kilos of cocaine directly from home. So the future of mafia, the future is represented by the dark web. So we need the technology to enter into the dark web. And I would like to end with a dream I have, to reply to my Colombian colleague. Talking about the distribution of drugs after their requisition. So here's my dream, a dream I have since 15 years, since one of my last visits in Colombia. Marijuana is produced everywhere, can be produced everywhere, even here, it could be produced here. So it's impossible to think to eradicate the marijuana traffic. Heroin is produced in several countries in the world. Even if today Taliban pretend to be the main producers. Synthetic drugs, well, not to mention them, because it is possible nowadays to order every kind of drug from Vietnam, India, or China. But cocaine would be the only kind of drug we can eradicate. But why I say this is a dream? Because I'm talking about the United Nations, which is a weak entity. The United Nations have no influence or practical impact because the world is ruled by corporations and a few countries, for example, the United States, China. For the rest, we are marginalized. And cocaine is a problem concerning mainly the Western world. It concerns the entire world, of course, but mainly the Western world in all aspects: economy, health, freedom, because with money we can buy newspapers, TV stations, we can influence the public opinion. So this is a huge problem involving millions of people. If we had strong United Nations with supranational power, able to intervene in the Amazon forest, the UN should say to farmers in the Amazon forest to stop the cultivation of cocaine, because the problem in the past was corruption of farmers in the area. So a farmer planting 1 hectare of coca is not interested in what he plants, is interested in having the means to support his family. So how much does he earn for 1 hectare of coca? 100, and for 1 hectare of coffee, 40. Then I'll give you 60, but I'll be here to monitor your cultivation. We occupy countries during wars, right? We were in Afghanistan, for example. Why aren't we in Colombia, in Peru, to monitor this situation? Let's think about the money we spend every day to fight against cocaine traffic in the world. It would be way cheaper to have a conversion of cultures in South America. When I went to Washington to see Salvatore Mancuso, he said, bring the president to me and I'll tell him how much I paid for his electoral campaign, because criminals also influence elections and political power, so we must change our approach. Otherwise, we'll be able to only seize 10% of the cocaine reaching Europe. Thank you.
Grazie, signor procuratore. Adesso passerei.
Now, I'd like to leave the floor to Mr. Francesco Lovoi. Where is he?
Di Palermo. Perché deve parlare lui prima. Va bene. Allora aspetta, lo devo presentare un secondo, anche se conosciutissimo.
Well, no, we have another speaker now. Maurizio De Lucia. He's highly specialized in the fight against Cosa Nostra. I would like to ask you a question. According to you, is the Cosa Nostra model dead due to the efficacy of anti-mafia laws, to repression, to the action carried out by the civil society? Is this model dead? And another question about 'Ndrangheta. Mr. Gratteri has traced the story of the 'Ndrangheta's leadership, but we don't know what are the ingredients of forming the structure of any 'Ndrangheta man. How can these people become credible and reliable on the drug trafficking market? Can you tell us something about these questions? First of all, I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for organizing such a beautiful event. El Pacto, the Italian authorities, all the authorities in Palermo. I really mean it. We organize a lot of conferences and we go to many events. However, first of all, I'm very happy to be here because we do this in homage to Giovanni Falcone, his wife and his bodyguards. We have to realize that this event is some historical moment because we have some magistrates here who have come a very long way and have some things in common: the protection of fragile people, the will to change things, and the will to share information, which are at the core of the strategies against transnational crime, both in in Latin America and elsewhere in the world. So I'd like to answer your questions. I'll be concise. The main theme is the present status of Cosa Nostra. We've been speaking a lot about 'Ndrangheta, but let's not forget that the Camorra has many important features. Unlike these two mafias, the contrast by the state since 1992 has a whole different history. The fight against Cosa Nostra started earlier on, and today Cosa Nostra is much weaker than in the past. But we can't say that Cosa Nostra is dead. It would go to its advantage. the horizontal communication structure in Cosa Nostra is the same as in the 90s and in the 80s. If you want to commit a crime locally, you have to ask the leaders who are above you. It's hierarchical.
E di natura di polizia, perché i fattori della sconfitta sono fattori economici e culturali, ma in ogni caso il tipo di pressione che noi dobbiamo fare su questa organizzazione.
We have to put pressure on the mafia. We have to dismantle small units scattered in the territory, because Cosa Nostra is constantly reorganizing itself. It carries out low-intensity criminal activities, and the core of these activities is economic strength, and international drug trafficking is crucial, especially cocaine. But the mafia is interested in any profitable business, and especially in all the types of illegal drugs. Cosa Nostra is not as big as the 'Ndrangheta in terms of drug trafficking at a European level, but there's no ranking, there's no championship in such a scenario. We must be interested in fighting and defeating all criminal organization, and we have to take advantage of methods that have proved efficient in one area and to copy them in some other area or against some other criminal group. Yes, it's true. Cosa Nostra had lived some very difficult times. However, today, Cosa Nostra is not weak, and it can also cooperate with 'Ndrangheta. Cosa Nostra is not a mere customer. It's becoming a minority partner in some very profitable businesses. The 'Ndrangheta nowadays, since 30 years, has become a reliable partner for Latin American criminals. However, the Cosa Nostra brand is still very attractive. If you present the two mafias like some kind of partners, some kind of supporters, facilitators in this illegal business, is their strong point. So the places where drugs are sold are controlled by different mafias, and now cocaine is the most requested item, and Sicily had to come to agreements with the 'Ndrangheta in order to provide cocaine to cocaine consumers, who are very, very numerous. Anyway, we have to keep two things in mind. The Falcone method. It's not only follow the money, it is much more than that. He had abilities, he had merits. He had he was reliable, and he was considered an authority because he worked abroad as well. If I'm not mistaken, he met George Bush Sr. in 1989. So he was considered a very reliable and authoritative partner to work with. So Cosa Nostra, going back to the question, is still a very powerful entity because money is used to gain power. According to Falcone, our goal must be the dismantling of every organization. It's good to seize tons of cocaine. However, our problem is not the amount of cocaine we're able to seize. It is the ability to destroy the network that has enabled cocaine to reach Sicily, starting off from South America. So transportation and financing are two important areas to work in, and the only way to pursue such goals is through international cooperation, because the mafia men have always cooperated with each other. Their history is a story of cooperation. If we look at the communication channel of the mafias, there's a well-established link between North America and South America. Remember Tommaso Buscetta? That was the beginning of the strike back of the Italian state to the mafia. So Cosa Nostra was very weak back then, but the same structure of the mafia allows the mafia to survive because its story started more than a century ago. So it's well structured. If we look at the Cosa Nostra model and its history, this will teach us many features that are common to the other criminal organizations all over the world.
Francesco Lovoi, che è stato a lungo.
And now the floor to Francesco Lovoi, long-time prosecutors in Palermo. He worked with Giovanni Falcone. They cooperated together. And now he is a prosecutor in Rome. I'd like to know two things. Is there a recent increase in drug trafficking in Rome? Are you aware of this situation? An increase in cocaine traffic? And then another question concerning economic mafia mentioned by Mr. Melillo. Did the economic mafia manage to have an impact in the city of Rome? For example, in the neighborhood of Trastevere, it is said that 80% of restaurants are controlled by the 'ndrangheta. What is your opinion, Mr. Lovoi? When I was a child, they used to tell me to be careful with friends, and I consider you to be my friend. But you are making my task very difficult. I'll try to do my best and include the replies to your questions within my intervention. Of course, my colleagues, not only Italian colleagues, but above all, our foreign colleagues already talked about the majority of topics. In particular, our colleagues from Central and South America. And I'd like to start with the perfect timing with which an article was published today in an Italian newspaper, recalling something that was said by Tommaso Buscetta to Giovanni Falcone. Maurizio De Lucia has just mentioned that Buscetta moved to Brazil even before starting to cooperate with justice, even before interrupting his relation with Cosa Nostra, or better, why he still had connections with Cosa Nostra. So he was already living in Brazil. Well, Buscetta told Giovanni Falcone, if you want to fight against the mafia, you have to fight and eradicate drug trafficking. Why so? Because Tommaso Buscetta who denied his implication in drug trafficking, but this is another matter, he was perfectly aware as a mafia member that without drugs in the 80s, mafia would not have the appropriate resources. And by mafia, I mean Cosa Nostra. Despite other sources of incoming. But drug, already at the time, back in the 80s, was the main resource for the mafia. So this was happening in the 80s. But this is true today. And it was underlined by our colleagues. We know the importance and the danger represented by drug trafficking in each country. As drug trafficking is a common share, a transnational problem. Why? Because drug, as Buscetta said, drug means money. Money means power. Power means ability to strengthen the criminal organization. Ability to strengthen the criminal organization from a military point of view. And now I step back and I would like to refer to what was said by my colleagues from Central and South America. So, strengthening of criminal organization means infiltration in public administration. of our colleagues said that drug trafficking and the related money generate everywhere, and I especially refer to the presentation of our colleague from Sao Paulo. So everywhere, this means corruption. So we always end up with corruption in different fields and sectors, also in magistracy, as mentioned by our Argentinian colleague. So we know that drug trafficking is at the basis of corruption and infiltration, and this should be enough to conclude any discussion on possible reforms aiming at reducing and fighting the drug trafficking and fight against criminal associations dealing with drugs. The Article 416 bis says all of this. It clearly says that. Gabriel García Márquez, in one of his books published several years ago already, described a particular event happening in Colombia in the 80s, 90s, which can be compared to what was happening in that period in Italy from the perspective of the attack of criminal organizations and drug trafficking, especially by cartels, which were very active in Colombia. And which can also be compared to what happened here in Italy in the 80s with the murders of magistrates, attacks, murders of journalists, kidnappings, not necessarily for extortion, but also as a form to attack the state. We experience all of this. And this keeps happening because in Central and Southern countries in Latin America, magistrates are being killed, the state is under attack, institutions are under attack in several ways. And the common element is always violence. Violence to which criminal organizations are used. So, what is the situation in Rome? Rome is the capital city of Italy. Well, we know the situation in Calabria, the situation in Palermo, the situation in Naples, and we have a mix of all of this in Rome, because we have a particular structure of criminal organizations in Rome, organizations responsible of drug trafficking. This is the main source of income. We have extortions, other crimes, yes, human being trafficking, but the main source of income is drug trafficking. And this happens through interactions among traditional mafias, Cosa Nostra, 'Ndrangheta, and Camorra, Then we have the local mafias, mafias born in the Roman region. We know the area is a rich one, giving space for business. And then we have several other organizations which do not belong to the mafia, but they act like mafia. They adopt the same characteristics and strategies. All these groups have to coexist peacefully, so they act through a multi-tier approach in the field of drug trafficking. So we have the provision of drugs to the main mafia organizations, and then we have connections with criminal groups in Central and Southern America. So we have a very structured system of laundering, of trafficking. All over Europe and Africa, with an extremely important ability of laundering. So this is not infiltration anymore. This is the occupation of the financial and economic system. Maybe this is not entirely true, because a lot was done over the last years before my arrival in Rome. Concerning the fight against laundering. So many assets were seized, but this keeps happening. Why? I'll give you a few examples to better understand the situation. Because all mafia forms present in the region are financed through drug trafficking. And I can say that drug trafficking in Rome is almost out of control. And then murders, kneecappings, and other strategies for killing people and attack enemies are related to drug trafficking. And then we have the coexistence together with Roman drug traffickers of Albanian criminal organizations, which are increasingly present in Rome and in the region. In some cases, they're also the leaders of some local organizations. We were surprised to see that in Rome, some criminal factions were guided by Albanian leaders. This is related to drug trafficking, as I said. And of course, I would like to conclude with my wishes. I have one last consideration to make. a part of the new forms of new mafias, drug trafficking in relation with traditional mafia. As somebody has already mentioned this today, referring to international criminal organization. So in Rome, this is related also to extremist and terrorist organizations at a national level. But this doesn't mean they are less dangerous, because the risk of common intents between political extremism and pure criminal associations dealing with drug trafficking can represent a danger. If you consider that over the last couple of years, we had new procedures for mafia cases, and over 1,600 people were convicted for drug trafficking. You can imagine the current situation. So we understand the importance of the fight of our authorities, of the magistracy, of the entire society. It is important to map, to identify actors, organizations, and places of activity of different criminal organizations, because this mapping allows us to better guide our actions. If I don't know who are my targets and where they are located, I cannot guide the investigations in an appropriate manner. And this at a national level. Concerning the international level on which we focused today, there is an increasing need to strengthen judicial and police cooperation for investigations in general, not only on the criminal side, but also, as was mentioned by Mr. Grassi, to stop and to prevent reinvestments in other countries implied in this cross-border phenomenon. We know that drug traffickers have the same characteristics in all countries. And I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting because this is the first time in a long time that I have the chance to take part in such an important event. Because of these common characteristics, the phenomenon spread to other countries, for example, the Netherlands. And the only way we have to cooperate is the creation of cooperation network. I remember when I started to work at the European level, there was a European network, the European Judicial Network, created in '98. And today, we talk about a real globalization of cooperation network. We mentioned at least 10 networks today. These cooperation networks allow us to exploit the international tools we have at our disposal. For example, the joint investigation teams provided for by every convention. I truly believe in the importance of creating a network, in the globalization of networks. As John Lucas said today, we are here not only for this, but it is for this reason that we have to keep being here. Thank you.
Dopo il procuratore Lovoi, credo abbiamo fatto il giro completo.
So now we have given the floor to all of the present public prosecutors. Unfortunately, Mr. Viola wasn't able to attend our meeting, so now I would like to address Mr. Alfredo Mantovano, the Undersecretary of State to the Presidency of the Council. He's also participating in the Authority for Security. So one question, if compared to the model, to the 'Ndrangheta model, and in the perspective of mafia that is becoming more and more a kind of entrepreneur, are there more methods that would allow to fight the two mafias in a more efficient way?
Anch'io ringrazio molto per...
Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you for organizing such a very important event. I want to greet all the prosecutors, not only the Italian ones, but also the foreign ones who have come such a long way. I tried to answer your question, but I need to give an explanation. Starting from a specific case, in 2021, Raffaele Imperiale from the Camorra was arrested in Dubai. He was considered one of the most influential brokers in drug trafficking at an international level. The investigation carried out, culminating with his capture, highlighted some important factors. This man opens bank accounts through other people. He uses Hawala channels. He transfers money without bank transfers. These are methods normally used by the Arab citizens, Northern African citizens. He opens companies in several territories in order to carry out services which are actually non-existing. He operates virtual currencies. He operates in the real estate market. He buys huge amounts of gold, up to 40 kilos per month. Why is this interesting? Mr. Imperiale is interesting because his profile gathers all the main aspects characterizing drug trafficking today. First of all, he evades taxes. Yesterday, the overlapping between drug trafficking and financial business was stressed. Today, the profits of drug trafficking affect geopolitical balances. Hezbollah nowadays gains at least 100 million per year thanks to activities carried out in the area of the tribal border. It's not necessary to have a high deal of imagination to understand that these people are acting in many places all over the world. The cooperation between the DEA and many authorities in Italy brought to the arrest of some Hezbollah members. So drug trafficking and money laundering were destined to fund Hezbollah activities. Anyway, the features of Mr. Imperiale's features tell us something that digital competencies are important throughout the whole supply chain. These technologies allow to create parallel markets of drug trafficking. We talked about retail sale in the area of the so-called dark web, where you can stay anonymous and you can buy pretty anything you want. The dark web is also where big economic players meet and they move a huge amount of cryptocurrencies. One of the most alarming activities is that in the web are more and more import-export companies that deliver new drugs on the market. New drugs often travel on routes that are legal. Chinese import-export activities are leaders. Chinese import-export activities are one of the main routes for that. Drug trafficking has expanded to all the ranges of criminal possibilities. There are also small companies dealing with drug trafficking, and this makes investigations more and more difficult because it has widened the areas of possible investigation. From the criminal's point of view, the fentanyl is being sold on the dark web. Fentanyl is cheap at a production cost. It's easy to produce it. It's highly addictive. It's easy to make because it's made of chemical substances that are easily found in shops. So it's easy to hide. So it has all the characteristics to win. So drugs based on chemical ingredients are easy and profitable and cheap. The analysis of the main cryptocurrency platforms reveal that there are more than 90 companies with offices in China that provide the precursors for fentanyl. They accept 90% of payments in cryptocurrencies. 17 of these companies have advertised publicly that they sell fentanyl, despite the prohibition by the Chinese government. The then president of the US, Trump, and Xi Jinping had an agreement some years ago. But we know now that the president of the U.S. has held a meeting with Xi Jinping with the same agenda. That means that something hasn't worked since Trump's meeting with the Chinese president. So the wallets containing cryptocurrencies allow to stock and pay, and we witnessed to over $27 million used in thousands of transactions. In the field of new drugs, artificial intelligence plays a major role. It is exploited by Chinese labs in order to come up with new chemical procedures, but it is also used by other people who need to acquire more knowledge on recipes used to produce these chemical drugs in a more efficient way. Nowadays, undercover activities are still in place, but they also take advantage of digital technologies in order to discover cryptocurrency activities which seem suspect.
Per sintetizzare l'oppioide.
Since I was a kid, I have been reading Chesterton's novels. In one of his novels, a priest who's also a detective says that men keep an average level in good, while if we speak about evil, no one can keep an average level. This is true for drugs as well. Please forgive me, but I don't agree on the definition of light drugs. What is light in some cannabis having 70% of THC? Drug consumption is bad because it can push you to try new substances that are stronger and more addictive. If you take small quantities of drugs, you still fuel a market. You still give money to a whole supply chain. You still give money to big criminal organizations. And also, it's important to highlight that drug dealers make money because they sell single drug doses to people who are addicted. I would like to conclude saying that the contrast to illegal sale of tobacco, tobacco smuggling that represented a danger for our country's safety, because the organizations dealing with that were based on some legal authorizations. Back then, one Balkan president was included in the list of people under investigation because of this. The whole supply chain was based on influential leaders, influential characters, even head of states. And they could also count on some banks in Switzerland, for example. I can also think of Apulia, where people used radar systems and violence systems in order to continue pursuing their illicit activities in drug smuggling. People belonging to criminal groups so people involved in drug selling in the streets were also tackled back then. An important law was approved basically by all the MPs, and it was about the imprisonment if someone was found with minor portion of drugs. It was a fundamental law that allowed the authorities to make considerable progress in such a field. Later on, this law was replaced by fines, by administrative fines. I don't think that drugs are healthy, nor is tobacco. Another phenomenon is the sale online of products derived from cannabis. And I have to tell you that the Italian law doesn't allow this. And it's, in particular, Law 42 of 2016. Also, the sale of cannabis derivatives is illegal, yet it still happens. This strengthened the idea that it is legal to sell such products, but it is not. This could also include other illegal substances. I mean, it's a trend where more illicit substances are then included. Our government is willing to apply the norms in force. We are doing that. It's no emergency. However, we try to act anyway. And I'm speaking about fentanyl. We are not just making measures more stricter, but we put in place an action plan about prevention and about the management of a possible emergency. We involved local administrations and judicial authorities. Also, the government is committed to contrast the illicit use of cryptocurrencies, and we are acting in several areas. We are acting within several institutional groups. This year, the G7 has set up a commission on cybersecurity for the first time. However, all efforts could bring to defeat if we do not take care of the cultural aspects. Culture in a broad sense, the culture of drugs. I mean, 50 years ago, Pierpaolo Pasolini, who was not against the drugs, however, he declared that drugs was not being consumed by an elite of artists who were seeking inspiration, but it was becoming a mass phenomenon. And according to him, it was a lack of culture. It was an attitude revealing a lack of meaning in life. I have to tell you that there have been over 100,000 deaths due to fentanyl in the US, because these people die of breathing respiratory crisis. Such a phenomenon is a consequence of some misleading conception of freedom. Such conceptions started in the 1960s, but now we can speak of a sort of pandemic. Cormac McCarthy, in his novel No Country for Old Men, says, if you were Satan and you were thinking about how to enslave the whole human race, you would probably think of drugs. This is one of the characters in the book saying that. The anniversary of Giovanni Falcone's death is an occasion to remember that the fight against drugs means to stand free against all types of slavery.
Sì, allora.
Thank you, Mr. Mantovano.
Questo seminario approfondito, ricco, innovativo.
This was a very rich, innovative conference following the example and the legacy of Giovanni Falcone. And I think that Giovanni Falcone would have organized something similar. This is an important historical initiative supported by National Prosecutor Mr. Giovanni Melillo. So we'll now give the floor to Mr. Melillo to summarize the situation concerning summarized crime, the economic mafia, who has analyzed a few years ago already. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all. We managed to stick to the schedule, so I really appreciate that, and I will try to do my best to give my contribution. I would like to thank the people supporting us in the organization of this event. and also all the people who contributed to this event through their work. I would like to thank the staff of the IILA and the staff of the Anti-Mafia and Anti-Terrorism Directorate. I thank all the participants, not only the prosecutors, both Italian and foreigners prosecutors who intervened, but also the prosecutors who came just to assist to this conference. We have prosecutors from Italy, from Latin America, and they came here to support this exchange of knowledge. And another positive aspect of this event is that we understood the importance of such days and conferences, so it is important to organize them in the future. We are thinking to organize the next event next year in Rotterdam, which is involved in global drug trafficking, as we know. Maybe I should have explained the reasons behind the organization of this event. Organized to promote the exchange of information and knowledge. During the last 3 days, some joint investigation teams were created. We talked about judicial procedures, and all the prosecutors had the chance to meet in person. I've always thought that the best way to honor Giovanni Falcone's memory is to work, to study, because studying is the base for a deep knowledge of criminal phenomena. And the reason behind the constitution of our anti-mafia model and approach. We must be aware that only through the knowledge and understanding of criminal organization structures we can implement our action of repression of the phenomenon. This is the first time we organize such an event in the city of Palermo. And I managed to convince Michel Padovani to moderate the conference. The model conceived by Giovanni Falcone is a model that keeps spreading all over the world in all countries. Ignacio Castillo announced that the parliament in Chile will institute a national prosecutor's office against organized crime, and the same is happening in France. The French parliament had already founded regional institutions 20 years ago for the fight against mafia. And another reason for which I wanted to organize this meeting in Palermo is that there's a tragic parallelism between magistracy in Latin America and in Italy. All the attacks which took place also with Giovanni Falcone's death and Paolo Borsellino's death. And also the murder of the prosecutor Antonio Machado Diaz, the murdering of Marcelo Pecci, which took place 2 years ago, and Cesar Suarez, a prosecutor working together with Patrizia Carranco, and Diana Salazar, that you managed to know through the video she sent. But 1 month ago, she was together with us to talk about joint investigation teams and international cooperation between Italy and Ecuador. And at the moment, Diana Salazar Mendez is under attack for her approach and we, as magistrate, we shall reflect on the fact that the network of prosecutors decided to organize here its annual session of work focusing on drug trafficking. And a pivotal element is the independence and neutrality of the public prosecutors, as well as the integrity of his functions. Our colleagues from Central and Latin America have underlined the dangerous situation in which prosecutors have to work. This being said, we've listened to very important and impactful interventions concerning Italian police forces, public prosecutors, gaining more and more credibility in the fight against drug trafficking. Maybe for the first time, we talked about the PCC, the Comando Vermelho, macro mafias, just to mention a few. And also the Trendaragua, another criminal organization existing in Brazil. All this information are extremely useful to us. We have to focus on mafias, but there's no ranking concerning the dangerous level of mafia, and every ranking is pointless. No mafia can be tolerated. We have to focus on market logics, guiding and leading the intervention of mafias. We spoke about the creation of integrated criminal systems issuing from the international expansion of criminal organizations, also through the export of drug, And we've also talked about common criminal strategies. At a global level, we've analyzed global markets promoting illegal traffics. And this allows us to understand the evolution of processes destabilizing several regions all over the world. We can see that in the Mediterranean area, which is a basin of desperation. It is clear that conflicts, war economy, sanctions create the ideal conditions for the expansion of the biggest criminal organizations. Mr. Mantovano spoke about the role of tobacco smugglings in former Yugoslavia. But it is also sufficient to consider what those criminal networks have become after the war in Yugoslavia. Today, these networks are among the main players not only in the drug trafficking sectors but also in money laundering. These organizations are constantly evolving, just like ours. They are able to control technologies, and Mr. Gratteri is perfectly right when he underlines the serious lack and deficiency of investment policies characterizing the last decade. We've stopped investing in new competencies and technological infrastructures. And this is why our police forces, which are acknowledged at an international level for their professionalism and competencies, are suffering from this problem. And we can see this gap also from a juridical point of view. Last October, several laws approving undercover operations were approved. And I think this is extremely important. And we also have other regulations included in the decree law, which I hope will be soon approved by the Senate, because it is important to use also in the cybercrime field the criminal tools we have. The main gap today, despite these positive conferences and the positive cooperation we have created, so the main gap is still existing on the plan of cooperation and efficiency at an international level. This is why some tools of international cooperation, which are still considered as experimental, are tools provided for by the Palermo Convention, and they were provided for already 20 years ago. But they're not used on a daily basis. in different countries. Mireille Delmas-Marty said that in front of this kind of phenomena, it is an illusion to promote the idea of a sole sovereignty. We should promote solidarity. Not only with close countries, but also with countries in Latin America. With which we are constantly in touch. And cooperation evolves around two principles: the respect of the rule of law, because there's no contradiction in the fight against organized crime, terrorism, and the respect of human rights. The Italian model is highly credible because he developed in the respect of the rule of law. And I also think that it is impossible to cooperate outside of the rule of law. And this is a serious problem in an extremely polarized world. We have several important organizations such as the United Nations, the European Council, the Pan-European Organization. And all of these institutions are extremely weakened by the evolution of the geopolitical context. The other important point is that no cooperation is possible without the refusal of any kind of political negotiation with criminal cartels. Negotiations with criminal cartels would only advantage those criminal organizations, and the experiences accomplished so far can confirm this thesis. These are two crucial points. Shared by magistrates of the network of the anti-drug trafficking network, with magistrates from the prosecutors of Ibero-American countries. The network was chaired until a few months ago by Francisco Barbosa Delgado, Colombian prosecutor. The anti-drug trafficking network in Latin American countries is a specialized investigation network, a network able to dismantle the criminal tissue at the basis of drug trafficking and laundering principles supporting the activity of criminal groups. This network urgently needs telematic infrastructures for the sharing of information. And I think that joint investigation teams, more joint investigation teams should be created to support this network, which should be integrated by other partners. And it is the idea itself of a joint investigation team to stress the importance of cooperation. We should replace the single request for cooperation with joint projects of cooperation, ambitious projects. Mr. Gatti has talked about the ongoing work to fill the huge gap currently existing in this field in relation to dangers connected to the Albanian mafia. We need to gather information. We need to have a shared analysis of the nature of criminal phenomena. Otherwise, we will lose our ability to intervene. We mentioned several times the symbolic and practical value of the cooperation between Giovanni Falcone and Tommaso Buscetta. And it is also important to take stock of the experience with 'Ndrangheta. Without a deep knowledge of criminal phenomena, it is impossible to implement repression actions. We would not be able to intervene against criminal phenomena. And I would like to say once again that this responsibility is a shared responsibility. Shared responsibility of police forces, magistracies, parliaments, single countries. We need to support the evolution of systems, technological, financial systems. We have to stress the importance of the integration of new models. And the Italian magistracy has an important responsibility if it wants to preserve a model for the organization of a public prosecutor's office based on the independence and autonomy of decision models. This is extremely important in the effort to analyze and understand international criminal networks, which very often are only volatile networks existing in the virtual world. So first of all, we have to implement a coordination action at a national level. Only then we'll be able to implement a coordinated action at an international level. From this perspective, I'm extremely positive because Italian public prosecutors' offices have started to work together a long time ago. And I truly believe in the importance to move from an investigation coordination referring to the single case and environment to a general perspective. Because coordination is extremely important at all levels. The Superior Council of Magistracy has announced to be working on due discipline for the organization of public prosecutors' offices. And I invite the magistracy not to include extremely strict measures undermining the activity of all actors of public prosecutors' offices. We have to focus on the duties of public prosecutors listed in the Code Article 371 bis, focusing on coordination. The criminal code also focuses on this aspect. So I think it is extremely important for the Superior Council of Magistracy to assess in the best possible way the importance and the need to combine the independence, the autonomy of public prosecutors, the autonomy of the magistrate, with the investigation activities. Because the credibility of the magistracy is based on this. Thank you.
Pensavo i miei compiti finiti fino all'ultimo.
Until the very last moment, you take advantage of me. I'm joking. Thank you for being here. I think we have listened to some very stimulating speeches. It was a very stimulating event. I hope that you will keep this in your hearts. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.